And welcome to Rauta's Worst to Best videos. This time we have real classic, real old school, old timer Celtic Frost or Celtic Frost, depending how you wanna pronounce the particular word. And by the way, both are totally correct according to these Merriam-Webster type of dictionaries. Just check it out if you don't believe me. But I've heard a million times these fights. Celtic, no, Celtic, Celtic, Celtic. Come on, who cares? Both are fine. Use whatever you want to use. But we're not talking about the dictionaries. We're not talking about pronunciations. I have plenty of problems with that given that I'm not native English speaker. So pardon my foolishness with these ideas and wordplays and whatever. Here we're talking about Celtic Frost discography. One of the most interesting bands and also weird band discographies in the world, especially in the world of extreme metal. Now, before I get into the actual order, my favorite ones, worst to best, according to me anyway, it's time to recap a little bit of these ideas. You know how certain bands have their discography going like maybe M letter, like first going up, then going down, then going up again, and then going down again. I mean, depending how their careers have, been going on, evolving from something better and then going down and whatever. Then there is something like W things, a band starts nicely, then comes down, and suddenly comes back again. And you get the idea. But rarely there are bands like Celtic Frost, in my opinion, and you will soon find out what I mean with these weird alphabetical ways to describe certain bands. For example, I would say Metallica is certain kind of a M, or at least some kind of a letter. I mean, climbing up, then coming down, and then a little bit climbing up again. And there are various bands of this sort. You could really talk about U, letter U, going from top to down and then coming back again, or just, going down in a declining way. But Celtic Frost is really none of those letters I just described. So what does it even mean? Well, I'll try to explain. Now, given that the band was founded already as early as 1984, it's an interesting career. They have split up a couple of times in the past, and they have come back with force, changing style between different albums and all, and eventually broke up, and then Triptychon took place. And also before Celtic Frost there was this band called Hellhammer, and Celtic Frost isn't just renamed Hellhammer. I mean, even though the early Celtic Frost material is quite close to Hellhammer and all, but still different bands. So we are not talking about Hellhammer nor Triptychon here. We're talking about just Celtic Frost. And mind you, even though the story of the band started as early as 1984 and ended as late as, well, technically speaking, 2008, I guess, would be the official year after the late album Monotheist, there still hasn't been too many full albums. I mean, it's only, let me count, 6? Basically only, 5 albums, because obviously Morbid Tales isn't a full album. So we have the Megatherian from 1985, Into the Pandemonium 1987, Cold Lake 88, Vanity Nemesis 1990, and then Monotheist 2006. What a gap here. But more interesting it is when you actually try to figure out how the band changed their style so many times, and with so huge steps taking between, different albums, even though there were not that many albums in the whole discography. And what a cult name it is in so many ways, even though the band is quite different from bands like, say, Iron Maiden or, Dark Throne or whatever old school name you want to drop here. I mean, 5 albums in so many years and still different styles and big disappointments. And you can pretty much just figure it out how people have reacted to this. If you just take a look here at Metal Archives, like early albums, 96 on average with 12 reviews. That's huge. As if everybody was saying like 2 to 10 out of 10 basically. That is that high on average. And then you see Cold Lake, 16 reviews and 33%. That's really brutal. People are hating that kind of stuff. Anyway, it's time to talk about my opinion and what I think about, and what, in case you're wondering what I'm doing here, I have actually my iPad here with a little bit notes, so I try to remember dropping these notes when I'm talking about these albums. So it doesn't matter how many times I would have gone through a discography, all the albums, to be honest, various times, depending each and individual release here, I would probably just forget a lot of things which I'm gonna say. But anyway, time to stop this introduction of talking about these albums and start with the worst. And everybody who knows anything about more morbid tales, Celtic Frost discography, which is kind of a morbid if you really think about it, can pretty much figure out which is my least favorite album. And it is indeed Cold Lake 1988, being the one of the most hated album, I guess, in the world of extreme metal. First of all, it's not really extreme metal, obviously. I think one of my good friends described it perfectly, saying it's like somebody with pants open, you know, not having a zipper up, would decide to play hard rock or heavy metal. Doesn't matter how you want to put it, because it's actually flirting with both of these styles. One could even say it's one foot in the world of glam metal and one foot in the world of heavy metal. So it's definitely flirting with both of these scenes, but not being able to do it properly. I mean, if you really think about it, Cold Lake, based on individual riffs and even individual songs, in my opinion, it isn't this bad, of 33% on average. I really can't hate the album, but I must say it's a weak album. In so many ways, there are lots of problems with these, whole compositions. Not maybe so much with individual riffs, because it's not that bad if you really think about it. I mean, remove the horrible vocals, which it seems Tom G. Warrior really can't handle. I mean, clean vocals, or maybe he didn't give them a chance. I really don't know. Maybe he is better with his clean vocals that we are giving him credit for, but it doesn't clearly show or be heard on Cold Lake. Now the thing here is, this is very, very mediocre album when it comes to songwriting, and doesn't matter what kind of production it would be, it's still quite bad. Now, the production is not super bad actually. It's totally just whatever 1980 style it would be. You know, it's kind of like mediocre ways in so many ways. I mean, it's not bad, but it could be a lot better comparing to so many other bands in 1980s doing heavy metal or just hard rock. Think about bands like Metal Crew or Skid Row or, I don't know, Twisted Sister, Wasp, stuff like that. And this pales in comparison to all of those. None of these songs are super bad, but it's not like this album has any good songs at all. So if I would say, I don't know, one song to be picked of all these, it would be kind of a hard, because really I don't have any favorites. There are no clear tracks which I could be picking like over the other. Like, okay, even though the album is bad, please check out this one. There are no songs on the album which are somewhat remotely recommended. And one of the main problems is, apart from, you know, vocals, is that it's like lazy songwriting. It's almost like getting the idea but not being able to execute it. If this would have been a debut album by some band, some different band, not an extreme metal band by the way, maybe people wouldn't have been that brutal about it, you know, the opinions and all. Or if this would have been a demo tape of a band coming from 1980s, maybe people would have been like, okay, it's not good, it's kind of a bad, but I mean, who cares? But as a Celtic Frost album, it must have been brutal at the time to hear it. I obviously didn't hear it in 1980s. I think it was actually very much this or the last decade when I heard it the first time. I can't really put my finger on it when I heard the first time, but only not too long time ago really, because I kind of avoided it on purpose, and I probably wouldn't have even touched it if I hadn't been, you know, doing this worst to best video. But still, I would say it's not that bad, not worse than maybe 5 out of 10 really. I think that would be a surprise to some people, but I think it's getting too much shit versus the actual quality. Now, what makes me rather interested in this whole deal of these scores and whatever is that, in my opinion, Vanity Nemesis, the second worst album by Celtic Frost, isn't, in my opinion, a lot better than Cold Lake. Now it's obviously a little bit different. This is trashier, and it's kind of a weird combination of heavy metal and trash, and one could say nowadays it's kind of a post-black, but because, I mean, post-black in the term of not exactly first wave of black metal anymore, and not really like sounding like black metal album of today, obviously, but there are these kind of gothic vibes which kind of create this weird feeling to this one. But it's quite trashy at some points, it's gothic at some points, and it's kind of a mess of various metal styles. It's definitely, in my opinion, also quite a mediocre album. And I really can't enjoy this album to the full. Now, there are a couple of songs which I guess, in a way, are a little bit better than, you know, the average thing here on the album. And I would say it's Wings of Solitude, because of the chorus part. It's kind of a catchy, really. The overall song, not that good. And also with this one, much like with Cold Lake, the vocals are the weakest part of the album. It's not so much like individual riffs or production. They're pretty okay here and there. And some of the riffs are actually quite good. There are trashier elements which sound like some Metallica leftovers in so many ways. But the overall album is like kind of a drag. I felt like I was kind of suffering throughout these 45 minutes. Not as much as with Cold Lake, but not that much less either. So I really can't say why this is on 9 reviews, like 78% average. For me, it's more like 5.5 out of 10 compared to Cold Lake's 5 out of 10. So hate me for my opinion or whatever, but that's how I feel about it. These are clearly the two weakest albums by the very band. Now, if you go towards the origins of the band, that would be the next pick. That would be Into the Pandemonium in 1987. Now, mind you, this wasn't that much before Vanity and Nemesis, and yet still the style is, well, quite different. Well, it starts with a rather horrible cover song. I don't know why they opted to go with that. I mean, it would have made a sense, you know, if it was live recording or, you know, live track only. But opening an album which is definitely known for a different kind of style of music, it's just a weird choice. In my opinion, this is a very, very peculiar release because it has good parts and it also has some kind of a what the fuck, like this Mexican radio. And also like songs like I Won't Dance is like, okay, you're clearly going to wrong direction. And then there are songs like Service of the Moon, and it's like, or Babylon Fell, which are like, okay, this is just changing from two previous releases, but I don't know. This is a weird hybrid. It's definitely a band in transition phase. Changing from this band that used to be first wave of black metal to something else, going through this gothic haze or mist and evolving something trashier and kind of a more mainstream. It's like a two bands ideas put together. This could be a Celtic Frost and a side project and just boom on one album. Hard album for me to enjoy, but partially actually quite good. I would say it's a 7 out of 10 for the better ideas. Other than that, I would be definitely saying this is closer to 6 out of 10. But like I said, there are songs like Cyrus of Moon and well, Babylon Fell, which kind of save a lot of that. And not only those two, but they're among the best. They're the kind of tracks which I would say give them a go, even if you're not ready for full Into the Pandemonium experience. And now comes the question, so which is my favorite full-length Celtic Frost album if it's not Into the Pandemonium? Like, there are Monotheist from 2006, and then there is this album called To Megatherian from 1985. Well, that's a tricky one because, in my opinion, they're both quite good albums. Well, let's call them solid, good albums. But I would say To Megatherian is the second best full-length album by Celtic Frost. Why so? Because it definitely has those roots those remnants from the band's once so glorious step into the world of black metal. This is kind of like that, but still also quite different. I mean, this is definitely going to the direction where Into the Pandemonium is, but definitely also a lot darker, heavier, more, I would say, dramatic. And this has some cool elements, and by the way, one of the coolest covers ever in metal albums by the late H.R. Geiger, having this devil using Jesus Christ as a sling of sorts. I don't know, remember what's this proper weapon to be used in, what's the name? I think it's kind of a sling, but not sling you use like that, not a slingshot, but anyway, you get the idea. It doesn't matter. If I'm incorrectly calling it sling and it's something else, just shoot me in the head and I'll suffer for my mistakes, that is. Anyway, the point here is the album is pretty solid and consistent all the way through. And this is something that I guess many people would have hoped Celtic Frost to be, to kind of keep doing and their material on this track, because it's very, very, consistent in quality. The songwriting is cool, the production is solid, and Dom G. Warrior's vocals are very, very much fitting with their kind of stuff. Not the so-called second wave black metal shrieky or screamy vocals or the kind of raspiness that later on started to define the whole genre. But given that this became a few years before the whole Norwegian black metal scene, the so-called second wave started to be, these were like pioneering part of that, aside with Bathory and other bands, so we really can't complain that he had this unique kind of a trademark of a vocal style to do that stuff. Now, if I had to pick a song here, it probably comes as no surprise. I would say it's Circle of the Tyrants, because it's such a classic track and it reminds me of Morbid Tales and all that stuff, even more than any of these other tracks. But here are no weak tracks, absolutely none. It's just that, Circle of the Tyrants is what's something that we could call a hit song of the first wave of black metal. And the others, they are good, but they are not that hit song. And I guess part of the whole deal here is that it's just something that's stuck in my brain so much more than the other tracks. There is no real other reason to that, I guess. It just, we as people are kind of sometimes victims of a certain song. It doesn't matter whether we're talking about Enter Sandman or The Trooper or Breaking the Law. That kind of stuff, it drills a hole in your brain and then it gets stuck here. And even if you later on kind of start to get sick of it, or you just kind of start to dislike it, it still might have had that impact in younger self, in which case you kind of like that song anyway. So the first album on this list, that is in the best of the list, would be Monotheist. This kind of came to me as a surprise, and I really had to ponder whether this Monotheist or to Megatherian, because, it's kind of interesting. Like I said, this whole curve with Morbid, once again I'm saying Morbid Angel. I'm talking about Celtic Frost, not Morbid Angel, Morbid Tales. It's just this Morbid Tales that is ringing in my head, and you will soon find out why. Anyway, it's like this kind of a J letter, Celtic Frost comes up, and after Monotheist, Triptychon, better or not, I don't know. Can't really say, can't really compare. It's a different band. The thing here is, it would have been fun to see whether instead of J, this could have been V, like going down and then going up again. And maybe this W, or I don't know. Anyway, it's interesting that Monotheist came to be their swan song of an album. Super dark, super heavy, super tragic, and yet still kind of sounding like Celtic Frost. It's like this ultimate comeback album in a way. It sounds different, it sounds more modern take, but it's still so crushing album. It's so like violent without being aggressive and fast tempo. It's not like it's a Marduk album, but it's so crushing. It's almost like doom metal meeting death metal and saying like, black metal, you are a kid. we're gonna reclaim you. Back to the darkness. And then boom, there is just this black hole. And this black metal brother or son or whatever is gone. With doom metal and death metal, and they all become one. That's how I feel about Monotheist. It's very, very interesting album in so many ways, because without Triptychon it would have been unique, one of a kind in a way. Yet it also has similarities with some other bands which are operating either in doom death genre or slow-paced black metal flirting with doom or flirting with death metal, kind of a death black in a way. It's a weird album, and it also almost runs for 70 minutes, and still it doesn't bore the shit out of me. So it's a success for sure, and better than just 8 out of 10. But I don't know, I wouldn't be ready to give it a 9 out of 10, because it kind of lacks this sort of kind of a climatic matter, this orgastic thing like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna come on this album because it's so goddamn good. It's good, but it's not superb, even in my books. Which kind of takes me back to this kind of, let's call it encore. Celtic Frost, Worst to Best is now done. It's time to say bye-bye and all that stuff, but now comes the encore parts. My favorite Celtic Frost album, I kind of revealed it by accident. Morbid Tales. Well, if this had been a full-length album, this would have been the best of the albums by the band. Why so? Well, in my opinion, it's the Celtic Frost release. It just rocks my boots off from the very beginning to the very end. Having songs like Into the Cryptophrase, and all that stuff, or Procreation of the Wicked. I mean, there are no weak tracks. Not at all. And it's definitely kind of shining through this first wave of black metal. Much like the same kind of energy, but kind of darker than Venom. Not so goofy, not so much tongue in the cheek. Kind of defying that presence of heavy metal by Venom. Not as dark and dirty as Bathory, and as such, kind of hard for me to compare, but definitely still on the same page, or pages, if you will. I mean, I love Bathory. I love early Bathory. Not as much as the mid part of Bathory, maybe, but still. And Celtic Frost is one of those very, very few bands to challenge Bathory in its own game. And I think Morbid Tales is one such release that can really compare, like, come to fist fights with me, Bathory, boom. okay, let's call it an even square fight, whatever. Like, no winner could be picked. Some of the stuff what Celtic Frost is doing is better than Bathory. Then again, some Bathory material is better. But the most important stuff is they're different yet from the same wave, and it's really very interesting in my opinion. This is something that is called like a super classic. By super classic I mean it has stood the test of time, and almost 40 years later it's still rocking boots off, having full of bangers and being just great EP all in all. So this would be my favorite Celtic Frost, but it's not an album. So it's kind of like added bonus to Worst to Best by Rauta, by yours truly, but of Celtic Frost discography. I don't know if my order of these releases makes sense to you. Maybe yours is very, very different, but I kind of doubt that anybody would say like, hey, Cold Lake is the best, followed by Vanity Nemesis, and the rest can just fuck off. I don't know, but I kind of doubt it. Anyway, an interesting band which luckily turned for the best later on their career, and luckily also was continued by Triptychon. Interesting band, but not too many good albums all in all. Still, definitely a classic, and should be regarded as such, no matter in which decade we're talking about. Anyway, this is my take on Celtic Frost with Worst to Best. What is your order from worst to best, or best to worst? Give me your list, give me your opinion, and let me know what you think about the band and these various releases. And see you soon with more reviews coming your way. Who knows what would be the worst to best in September 2021. Some disbanded band for sure, but which one? Let's find out. Bye bye.